Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this episode of the Bridging Impact Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Furtado. In today's episode, I interview Evan Unrau, Director of PeacePlayers Los Angeles. So, in this podcast, we talk about what is PeacePlayers, how the sport of basketball can be used for social change, and how to be an incredibly effective coach with this one simple tip. Make sure to listen to the whole episode to find out all this information. All right, let's dive in. Hello, Evan. Welcome to the Bridging Impact Podcast. I'm thrilled for our conversation today. I'm excited to talk about your experience now as a director of Los Angeles at PeacePlayers, your experience as a college basketball coach, and your just experience overall in life. And so how we like to start these podcasts is we like to understand the definition of what you think of impactful leadership is and how that impactful leadership shows up in your role at PeacePlayers.
Awesome. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Super excited to be
here
today. That's a big question.
Yep.
I guess when I think about leadership in general, it's kind of like, how do you move a person or a group towards something? I think whether that's positively, if you do a good job or a bad job, the output could be something that's positive, or it could be something negative, or it's kind of something all the way in between. So like positive, impactful leadership, it's how you move a group towards an outcome that is successful. That's kind of how I think about it.
Right. And then how does that positive impact kind of show up as in your role in PeacePlayers?
Yeah, I'm sorry. So PeacePlayers. So we're an international nonprofit that works all across the globe. Here in Los Angeles, we are working in Watson, South LA. And we use basketball to bridge the divide in communities in conflict. We also are working to develop a global network of youth leaders. And we're, working to provide equitable opportunities in kind of under-resourced communities. So leadership in relationship to the space that I work in is kind of like multifaceted. The easiest one is I have a team that's underneath me. So I am the leader of the Los Angeles team, which means we have two full-time staff underneath me, and then a cohort of coaches. So leadership in respect to our team is how our team accomplishes the goals that are set by us, our KPIs, our key predictive indicators that we develop with our U.S. leadership team. So there's directly leading our team, our group of people. I think I'm also part of a U.S. leadership team. So how am I a leader within a group of people that are my kind of counterparts, my equals? So how do I show up into that space and be a leader with that group? And then I think just in the space that we work in, how are we helping? Are we helping? How am I communicating with other nonprofits within Los Angeles? How am I communicating with our partners? How are we all working together towards this goal that PeacePlayers has? So I think of the kind of these leadership in these different spaces specific to PeacePlayers.
Right, and the leadership probably looks differently in each role that you're kind of playing in. So I'm curious, you're talking about how your definition of leadership was moving a person or a group towards something. And let's break it down to the micro level when we're going to Watts in South LA. For those that are listening right now, right? I'm a little more familiar with PeacePlayers myself. Even though I haven't quite coached a day yet, I've had my training, so I have a little bit of background on where the goals and the mission are. But for that, where is PeacePlayers trying to move, people that come to the organization of PeacePlayers, specifically the youth leaders? Where are we hoping to move them going forward?
Yeah, sure. So PeacePlayers is, again, we have these three buckets that we're kind of looking to have impact in, and so again, that's bridging these cultural divides, creating these youth leaders, and then providing these equitable opportunities to the kids we're working with. So I guess if we're talking about like what is like success in terms of the work that we're doing right now, it's, for us, there's some organizations, there's some groups where it's like breadth is more important than depth, and for us depth is really important. And so the Peace Players, it's a long-term game. We work with this life cycle of a Peace Player. So it's someone who's in middle school who then is part of our Peace League, and they transition into high school, and then they're part of our LDP program, and then they transition into college, and then we're hiring them back as youth coaches. They're part of our leadership academy. We're supporting them with career readiness skills. And then the idea is to eventually get them to a spot where we can hire them as full-time staff members. And so it's a really long-term game that requires a lot of depth of connection and work and opportunities provided. And it's something where if you go to like our international sites, like if you go to Israel, if you go to South Africa, Northern Ireland, it's like live and well. Like there's kids that, are program managers that started off as Peace Leaguers, a number of years ago. The organization's been around 20 years internationally. So for us in the U.S., we're just very young in that life cycle. So just creating that like depth of relationship starting in middle school and then just continuing to build from there. It's kind of where we're at right now.
Yeah, 100%. And that's exactly what my follow-up question is going to be about, kind of the depth of relationships and in terms of the movement and how it's like bridging divides essentially in some of these different areas and globally, right? Like you can have ideas of coming together and working together, but you actually have to like build relationships to do so. So I'm curious, what is, Peace Players, how does that they facilitate these relationships between basketball players and using it as a tool to bring about social change?
Yeah, for us, it's we want to show up, and we want to keep showing up and keep showing up and keep showing up and just be really consistent in that. We don't want to be an organization where the kids see us one day and they don't see us, the next. We really, being a stable, reliable organization, stable, reliable programming, stable, reliable coaches, who it's not just like we show up and roll a basketball out onto the court and it's like, okay, peace out, we see it. Maybe we'll see you next week, maybe we won't. There's times when that's what we've had to do to kind of just like start and get the excitement and the attention around what we're doing. But it's more about like creating that like depth of programming where we're learning about who these kids are as people. We're learning about the things that they're struggling with. We're learning about what their aspirations are. We're trying to develop relationships with their parents. We're trying to build, relationships with other community members that are kind of the infrastructure around them. And again, like I said, it's a long game. It's not something that's going to happen like that. But we're really committed and passionate about like the potential for Peace Players in Los Angeles and just the potential for its impact in the kids we're working with, the families we're working with.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, and I think that's the reason why I wanted to coach and work with Peace Players. So I can definitely testify to that and the mission. But I want to back up a little bit and, kind of ask you, how did you end up joining, Peace Players as the director, and give us a little bit more backstory on why this is important to you?
Yeah, sure. Oh gosh, where do I start? So I'm on my like fourth or fifth career. Which is like, if you would ask me 20 years ago, like, is that what your professional career would have looked like? I would have been like, absolutely not. So I played college basketball. I played professional basketball. And I thought that when I was playing overseas, I was like, had this idea that like, I wanted to be Tara Vanderveer. I wanted to be Pat Summitt. So I really thought I wanted to be a college coach. And so I began that journey. It was a video coordinator with Stanford, which was awesome. We actually, my year, we went to the Final Four, went to national championship game. I got smacked by Candace Parker last year at Tennessee and Coach Pat Summitt. And then from there, I started my coaching career. I coached at UC Santa Barbara, coached at Santa Clara, coached at USC. I went back to Stanford. I went back to UC Santa Barbara. So kind of just like traveled up
Doing a little tour.
the West Coast, and I really enjoy it. I do miss it at certain times. There's a lot of joy that comes from the coaching profession, but I think also that's all about people. And there was a couple stops where I didn't exactly kind of align with the environment and the people that I was working with, and that can be hard in that profession, especially. I really wanted to be like one place for a long time, and just kind of got tired of hopping around. And as I got older, was really looking for some more stability in my life. So my wife at the time was not my wife. She was a professional basketball player playing overseas in Turkey. And in the middle of playing overseas, had gone to law school. So she also she's a Turkish. So she played in the Rio Olympics for Turkey in 2016. And then the idea was for her to like retire and then let's like settle down in Santa Barbara. But she got a pretty cool job in Los Angeles. So we were like, this is a long story. We were like kind of traversing back and forth from LA to Santa Barbara, and it just wasn't sustainable after living 4 years apart overseas. So I just kind of said like, okay, like I've been doing this coaching thing for about 10 years. Like you got the big lawyer job. So like, let's let you take the lead for a little bit. So that's what we did. Kind of packed everything up and moved to LA. And I had an idea that I wanted to get into like sport nonprofit. And so really just started networking and volunteering and, making phone calls with different people and setting up meetings, and tried my hand in a lot of different things. And I had an opportunity with the PCA, which is Positive Coaching Alliance. So did that for about 10 months. And then that turned into, I was running the youth basketball department at the LA Clippers. So I did that for about 2 years, and that was just like awesome. Could have stayed there for a long time until PeacePlayers called. I had a chance in 2014 to go to Cyprus as a VIP for their summer camp. Myself and a guy named Pat Garrity played in the NBA for a long time. Now the two of us were like the US VIPs, and just like the experience changed my life. I went back the next summer. My wife went back the next summer. Then I went back the next summer. Then we both went back the next summer to Cyprus. So just kind of like really got ingrained into the PeacePlayers family. And when I was in LA, they launched in 2018 and just tried to be supportive, especially my work at the Clippers. And then, opportunity opened up, and it was a hard, it was one of those things where it was like a hard decision to leave like a cool job in the NBA, especially like in the youth basketball space, especially as a woman in that space. But PeacePlayers really aligns with kind of like who I am and what I'm about. So just had to make the jump, and just really grateful that I had the opportunity to.
Right. It was kind of that journey. You were kind of journeying around as a coach, and didn't have quite that consistency. And then, you find your way down here in LA, because that's just where the next chapter took you. And honestly, like what we were talking about pre-podcast, Evan was giving me advice, for those of you listening, about like just kind of putting ourselves out there and kind of networking and doing small volunteering and or paid gigs, if it's 1 or 2 times a day, just getting out there. And I think now it seems like everything kind of built on each other. You went to the Clippers, and then I want to kind of fast forward before you take the position here in LA to like, what about being in Cyprus like really connected with you?
Yeah. One, I love travel in general. I just think that there's something just like so special about being someplace like different than what you're used to, right? Like just for me, I love like art and like architecture and things like that. So just like internationally, like a lot of times there's a lot of those history and art, and a lot of those things are really cool to kind of see in person. But just like I loved playing overseas. I loved, getting an invite from one of my teammates to come over to their house and, have a homemade cooked meal of something I've never like seen in my whole entire life. And just learning about political systems and, the realities of a culture totally different than mine. Like, it just really helps, I think, put your own personal life in perspective. I just love travel in general. And so Cyprus combined like travel, basketball, and then just being around just like kids who are in Cyprus. Kind of the conflict is there's the island is literally like split in two. There's Turkish Cypriots and there's Greek Cypriots, and there's like a buffer zone, a UN buffer zone. So like you literally have to like get show your passport to go from one side to the other. It's wild. But like, you have these kids who like, they are 13, 14, 15, 16-year-olds, but they're like really are motivated for change and to kind of move the needle and move past some of the historical barriers that they've kind of grown up with. And that's just like incredibly inspiring to be around these young people who just have this like wherewithal. And then I would say maybe my second or third year of doing the camp, it was a year where they brought kids from all of the different international sites. And I just remember like hanging out at the end of the day. We're all exhausted. It's hot. Just like the adults and coaches were hanging around a pool, just kind of chatting. And then like the kids were over like in a circle and they were playing this like stupid game, but it was like the Greek Cypriot sitting next to like the Palestinian girls, sitting next to like the the Northern Ireland, the Protestant guy sitting next to like the kid from South Africa. And it was just like these kids who were just like kids. And there wasn't, they like, sure, they have a lot of things about them, but they were just kids connecting. And there wasn't, religion, race, politics, any of that type of stuff. They were just kids being kids. So I think just since then, I've just been like sold PeacePlayers, like whatever I can do to be part of the organization, to support the organization, like I'm all in. So.
No, I think that's beautiful, and I think seeing humans as humans, right? That's one of the core values of PeacePlayers, and I know that what we've been talking about internally with like coaching and how we all design the curriculum for the players to kind of collaborate and work together, and obviously see their coaches as human and see themselves as human. I'm curious, what are the possibilities of doing that? Because we obviously live in, like, we don't need to sugarcoat it, like a society where like politics are incredibly fragmented, and that's probably putting it in a kind way. And it's just like there's so much division, and we, especially with the internet and the rise of kind of living in our own kind of groups, our own, tribes, right? Like it's us versus them. I really would love to unpack a little bit more of like the value seeing humans as humans.
Yeah. It sounds really easy.
Right.
It's incredibly difficult. I think a lot of those things are learned behaviors, and it's generational. It's passed on and passed on and passed on and passed on. And I think that's why working with kids in particular and trying to provide a different perspective, provide education, provide experiential opportunities to travel and to meet, someone who doesn't look like you or someone who has different experiences as you is just so incredibly important. Because, there's a lot of kids who grow up and all of a sudden they are adults, and now they're put into a situation where, again, it's someone who thinks differently than they do, looks differently than they do, and they don't know how to deal with that. And if you've grown up in an environment where those differences aren't celebrated, or they're not, like tolerance is not taught, and just having an inquisitive nature about trying to understand something that you don't understand, I think that a lot of our problems stem from. So again, just like the importance of like just trying to get to kids early is just really, really, really important, because I think it's really hard to change minds and behaviors and kind of things that have been ingrained in you since a little kid once you're older. So just the importance and the value of like getting kids when they're young.
Yeah, no, 100%, and getting them to work and collaborate and just live a little bit more with compassion for those differences that we all have. You know, some of us, whether it's racially, politically, economically, there are so many different ways that I do think it is. I think that's why I enjoy working with youth, is because there's something about like the possibilities that youth bring, that they can bring that change, versus like trying to like change an adult's mind, just like
Yeah.
beating your head against the wall or something, right? And I'd like to talk about the next value that I actually am a big believer in, is like inside out transformation,
Yeah.
and especially in a world where we're looking so externally. Like we Google like, how do I do this? How do I do this? How do I change this? But a lot of times, like in terms of like making like real positive change in our own like lives and then our own communities, it like starts kind of with ourselves and within our own communities. And I'm curious, if you could elaborate more on that value.
Yeah. It's a hard one. Um,
Yeah, they're not easy.
yeah, it's hard to be able to look at yourself and be like, gosh, and maybe I got that one wrong, or like, gosh, maybe
Mm.
I'm not right on that. Um, I think a quality we could all be better at is just listening. Um, I think that like you just listen to somebody else's story. If you listen to somebody's voice, or listen to how they tell a story, or listen to how they talk, or just listen and watch. I think that there's a lot of value from that. I think like, if I'm hearing you, if I'm providing you an opportunity to tell your story, right? And then I have the maturity and the wherewithal to be able to listen to that and then take it in, and does that change how I feel about something? But I think you have to stop and listen to people before you can make change within yourself. Um, and I think it's like, like I try to check myself on stuff all of the time. There's like a lot of things that like I think I know, or I thought I knew, and I'm like, oh no, I got that wrong. And it's just like acknowledging that you're not right about everything, and acknowledging that there's things that you need to get better at, and like just continuing to have that like growth mindset, but trying to like having the urgency and the desire to change and to get better and to understand things that maybe don't come as easy to you as other things. But inside out transformation, it's a hard one, but I think it's critically important for us to kind of get anywhere in this craziness that we live in.
100%. Yeah, no, listening is definitely one that there's obviously the old saying like you have two ears and one mouth for a reason,
Yep.
but it's one of those things that's like we could talk about, but it's actually quite a bit more like, I mean, it's simple, but it's like kind of hard to always do, right? Like sometimes like we want to get our point across, and we're just thinking about our response. Like if I'm like in this podcast, like I'm not going to listen to what Evan has to say. I am going to think about my next question I'm going to ask, which is honestly how I started podcasting. Like I was really bad. And so kind of that's like, you have to learn from that. But
Yep.
I do think listening is a really important skill, and it's something that I'm learning more and more. And, I really do try and practice and get better at. I'm curious, with the thought of listening and talking about storytelling, and it's honestly one of the reasons I love podcasting and having conversations, is like, do you have any like stories that come to mind of, I guess, quote unquote success stories, but really just like, players going through and living the Peace Players mission and being affected by that in a positive way?
Yeah. Um, I think I could give you. I mean, I guess that I can use this in like a personal story, and also how it kind of like translates to like our work with Peace Players. Um, I would say that like, and you may not see this at this point, Justin. Like, I'm not a big talker. Like, I am a leader of this team, but I am not like you'll find that like I'll have like, all right, Nat, you like take the lead and kind of communicate on a lot of different things. I don't really enjoy talking all that much, but like a lot of that is a product that just like things I've experienced as like a kid. Um, like I had a little bit of a tough upbringing. I lost my father to suicide when I was 7. My sister was like a drug addict, an alcoholic. My mom remarried. She divorced. He was abusive. But he committed suicide. So just like a lot of craziness as a kid. And so for me, like sports was like really this like opportunity to like I let sports, I let my like physical movement speak for me. And I think you see that a lot in a lot of kids who deal with trauma is like aren't always the most like talkative, but like kind of more like are watching and listening. My goddad, who was my AU coach, I named my daughter after him. We have these like funny stories about how he says I used to just like watch him in practice. And he'd be like, "What? Why is this kid just like always staring at me?"
Right.
But it was basically like I was watching to see if I could trust him, because I just kind of had this like slew of just these kind of like really tough life experiences. So I think you also see that with a lot of the kids that we're working with is they have an antenna out for like, can I trust you? Is what you're telling, like, can I rely on you? Like all of those qualities that are just like really, really, really important. And like I was mentioning earlier, just like for us as peace players that show up consistently and show up with incredible energy all the time and be reliable and all of those things are just critically important. Because I think that's, you know, a lot of the kids that we're dealing with have also dealt with, you know, not experiences similar to mine. Some may, but like their own version of like trauma in their lives, whether it's like in the community around them, whether it's in their home, whether it's at school. So just those things are just really, really, really important.
I think you touched on an important piece in showing up and being consistent, because it is about building the trust, you know, with their team, whether it's coaching youth or coaching or just working, you know, if you're working in an office or if you're teaching. But I'm curious, you know, for those that are listening that maybe working or teaching or coaching other, you know, players or students with, you know, trauma, what are some of like the ways that coaches can be that supportive, like nurturing, caring person that a lot of coaches set out to be?
Yeah, I think it's like coaching's hard. Um, if I'm thinking about like college coaching, like there were days where like I had to show up to like be on the bus at like 5:30 in the morning because we were going to drive 2 hours to the airport, we're going to travel and all this type of stuff. And if I don't want to be there, you know, the kids don't want to be there, especially if maybe you lost the day before or whatever. But like I knew that if I showed up and I was pouty and I had a bad attitude and the kids saw that, then that gave them a pass to be able to do the same thing. And so you have to care enough about the opportunity, the potential for their success, to then like hold yourself to a different standard. So if it's 5:30 on the bus, I will be the first penny you see with a big smile on my face, and I'm waving and, you know, good morning. And they're like, Coach E, like, why do you have so much energy? And I'm like, hey, you know what I mean? But I think that even if you do that once, you have to do it every single time. Because then like, this like, you know, as a coach, what do we hate the players who are like this, where it's like, you never know what you're going to get. You have to like model that yourself as a coach and as a leader. Like I have to show up every single day on top of my stuff. And that's not to say that there aren't going to be days that like you struggle as a leader or a coach. There are absolutely going to be. And I think that we live in this culture right now where it's much more acceptable to say, hey, I'm struggling. And it's an amazing thing that we have this opportunity to say, I'm struggling. So if I'm having a day like that, like you bet I'm going to tell my team, like, hey guys, I'm struggling right now. Like, I apologize if you feel something off with me. This is kind of what I've got going on. So I think that there's a lot of value in also being able to like communicate that. I think it's just more accepted for you to share that. But yeah, you just like, you have to want what's best. You know, you have to want to seize what the best potential out of the kids that's possible, and that means like sometimes like sacrificing yourself, and that's like part of being a coach, because it's hard, but the payoff is, you know, it's really beautiful. Whether that's winning the game, whether that's a kid graduating, whether that's a kid, you know, getting off the bench, whether that's a kid overcoming an injury, just all of those successes come in really different forms. And it's just like all that hard stuff that it takes on your end it's worth it.
Yeah. And it is, I think, a couple of things, like you have to be vulnerable and, you know, part of it coach, like if you want your players to be real with you, you have to kind of be real with them first and kind of lead the way and take the steps. And then at the same time, you have to, if you want, your players, your organization to hit a standard, you have to hit that standard for yourself every time, even when you don't want to, even on those days and when it's 5:30 and it's like, yeah, if you just showed up and gave everyone nucks and like was sleeping, like, they're going to be pretty sleepy for the next game, right? They're looking for that leadership.
I had this coach who was like, anytime there'd be like a stressful point in the game, she'd be like, she'd call a timeout, she'd like sprint over and she'd be like, you have to relax, like calm down. She'd be there'd be like veins popping out of her head. It's just kind of like,
right.
kids are just like that's not helping, right? Like,
nah,
as adults to like regulate ourselves and, be aware of that. And also have a staff around you who'd be like, hey, this is not yet. You know what? When you like yell like that in those type of situations, like it's actually not helping. So it's just.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like you're not helping whatsoever. Like you have to demonstrate. I think that's kind of where the old wisdom comes from. Like your actions need to match the words that you're talking about. And I've been kind of like, obviously still a new coach, but listening to different things. Like if you say like, oh, practice is so important and you treat it so important, but you play, your most talented players who honestly don't practice that hard, are you really living to those values? Or if you're that coach that comes in the huddle and just screams, calm down, like it's not going to.
It goes to office. It translates to the office too, right? Like if you're the coach that's like, you have to communicate, or you have to call out screens, you have to talk to each other, but then you go back to the office and you don't talk to your staff. You don't effectively communicate things you're frustrated with. You don't effectively communicate things that you want to see different. You don't effectively celebrate, small things or acknowledge people's, growth in certain spaces. Like that stuff matters. If you talk about working hard, talking to your players, you got to work hard and you got to put time in the gym, but you check out and go home and don't watch all that film and, all that type of stuff. So just like a lot of accountability that has to come with, like, to your point, like matching how you're leading your team has to also match about how you lead yourself and how you lead the people around you also.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting point that you brought up, because we're starting to talk a little bit more in society about bringing your whole self to work, and it's almost like why would I preach this to my teams or even put it on a podcast, and then at home I'll just like let it go. So it's kind of like acting on your principles all times. So I'm curious, like what your thoughts are on like the phrase like bring your whole self to work.
Yeah. I think of it more, it's like, I think there's a lot of talk about like authenticity. Something I've really probably had the most growth in as a leader throughout my last part of my career is just like this like comfort and like confidence in like who I am as a person. Like knowing that like I'm not perfect. There's a lot of spaces where I have shortcomings. Some of my shortcomings I am like very well aware of, and I try to really kind of like fill those gaps around me. There's some shortcomings that I'm sure I don't know are there, and I'm like really open and willing to like learning what they are and try to get better at them. But I think like having the authenticity to like be like, hey, this is who I am, right? Like,
Yep.
And I think that puts people at ease. I think it allows people to also show up like as who they are. And it's like, I want to be celebrated for who I am. I want to be like, I think it's fun to have like a team around you who can like make fun of you for the weird things that you do. And it's like, I want to be able to make fun of you for the weird things that you do. And it's just like creating that like that environment of just like we all are who we are, and we all have these like really great things about us, these weird things about us, and these hard things about us, and all of those things are okay. Like nobody's perfect, and I think that like trickles down to your team as well. Even with PeacePlayers, like creating this environment where it's like the kids know that like Coach Justin is like has a weird sensitivity to X, and like the kids will make fun of Coach Jessens for that, but like you can then also make fun of them for like whatever they do, and it just kind of creates
Right.
really just like safe space for kids to be who they are, and for for coaches to be who they are, and that stuff's celebrated. Like I just think that's when you have like really good chemistry as a team.
Yeah, and that team chemistry, that team camaraderie is that's everything. And I think that's probably, thinking about, if we think about sports, I'm honestly like growing up, I kind of like stopped liking the Warriors because they're so good. But I read Steve Kerr's book, and their last team, the last title that they won, they had like the most it was like most touch points.
Yeah.
Like they're always given high fives, and it's just like that is contagious. That's a way of kind of like making teams a better place, because they love playing with each other. And I'm sure that Steph makes fun of Clay makes fun of Draymond. The list goes on, and bringing your goofy self to work. As we haven't worked in person quite yet, but you're gonna notice that like I have very goofy idiosyncrasies, and at first the kids are gonna think it's weird, but then they can make fun of me, and we make fun of them, and it goes back and forth.
I will make fun of you.
Yeah, that's fine. That's good. I'll find something to make fun of you too, and that, yeah. But that's what's fun, is like when we realize at the end of the day, especially with basketball, like it's something I've really been realizing, is like we're literally throwing like a round ball in a hole, but if you do it really well, you can get paid millions of dollars, and it's a huge industry. So, but at the end of the day, like it's just all for fun, and to have a good time doing it.
For sure, and it builds trust, right? Like if I trust you enough, or you trust me enough that we can like have that banter and have that all of that, then it's like that just helps helps the product on the court, it helps the product in the classroom, it helps the product in the office, just like that authenticity, that like mutual understanding, like just breeds that trust. It's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we wrap up our conversation, I'd like to finish the podcast on, what advice you have to coaches, leaders who want to kind of uplift and impact the next generation of leaders. Any resources that you recommend, and where people can either find you or Peace Players, and find out more.
Yeah. I think the world is hungry for like coaches and youth leaders, and at the end of the day, if it's basketball, like what's the quote, like it doesn't matter, like what is it, it doesn't matter what you say or what you do, it's like it matters how you make me feel.
Yeah,
like, that's just incredibly true. Like you may not be like the best X's and O's coach, or you may not have the most experience coaching, or you may not have the most experience doing X, Y, and Z, but like if you're a good human and you truly care about youth and the opportunity to like be a positive force in a young person's life, like that's tremendously more important than those other thneed. So like get out there, put yourself out there. We need more female coaches. We need more female role models. We need more women who are visible in the lives of not only young girls but young boys. I think that seeing women in leadership positions at a young age, especially if you're a young boy, like that helps change perceptions, because I think we find out daily, whether you follow sports or not, that there's still a lot of a long ways to go in terms of like gender equity and perceptions of like women in athletics. Other advice, just like show up and keep showing up. It's just really, really, really important. And find something that you feel like you're good at, and like provide your time in that. Whether if it's like maybe it's a volunteer as a providing marketing support, volunteer to provide social media support, volunteer to provide financial support, like just find an opportunity to give back, because there's like a lot of kids, a lot of families, a lot of communities in need in LA and all across the world. And just people need your support. So it's put yourself out there.
Beautiful. And any resources you recommend, reading, watching?
Yeah, resources. Junior NBA does specific to basketball. Junior NBA has a lot of really good content online. Especially their Her Time to Play initiative. It's an initiative to try to get increase the participation and retention of girls in sports. So there's a lot of resources for coaching girls, but then just coaching kids in general. Positive Coaching Alliance has a lot of great resources for parents, for first-time coaches. Mojo is a new app that's out there, an opportunity to work with, help develop their basketball curriculum. They're awesome. They have done soccer, basketball, flag football, but just providing an app that helps build practice plans and drills ideas for kind of first-time coaches, which is really, really, really cool. It's the internet. There's a ton of resources out there. Just Google something. But I think those three are pretty reliable. USA Basketball also has a ton of great resources on their website that are free. They have coaching clinics for all ages, kind of all across the U.S. Lots of opportunities to learn and grow.
Perfect. And finally, where can people either connect with you or learn more about PeacePlayers?
Yeah, sure. So PeacePlayers, you can check us out online. It's www.peaceplayers.org. You can learn more about the organization internationally, our work in the U.S., and then specific to Los Angeles. Always reach out to me. I am EUNRAU@peaceplayers.org via email. I am on Twitter and Instagram. I'm not a TikToker, but you can find me there as well. But happy to support and help in any way. And if there's people have interest in the work that we're doing and PeacePlayers LA specifically, hit me up. It's really important. It's really important for us to kind of share what we're doing, share our message, and just try to spread the word and hopefully find support, whether that's financial, whether that's coaching, whether that's just getting the word out. It's really, really important for us. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for your time today, Evan. I enjoyed our conversation, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Cool. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Bridging Impact podcast. We'd love it if you would subscribe, leave a comment and a review on whatever platform you're on. It's the best way to help us grow. We appreciate you for doing that. We'll shout you out on social media. I'd also love if you connected with me on social media. Let me know your thoughts, and this is why I do it. I want to share knowledge and wisdom from experienced leaders to people like yourself and myself, so we can have this dialogue and move forward, make an impact on the world. So stay tuned, stay subscribed. Cheers.